Okay, hello. Today I have a very special guest with me, Scott Mineo, who is the founder of PACT, Parents Against Critical Race Theory, which has on the website, which I'll share the link to the website, stop LCPSCRT.com. And the within the mission statement, it says, PACT calls for all students, staff, families, and members of communities around the country to engage in the disruption and dismantling of critical race theory. PACT rejects racist and other hateful behavior and language, recognizing that critical race theory encourages discrimination, hatred, oppression, and violence. And it's interesting. It's interesting because this was just a coincidence, but just yesterday, I'm sure you heard about this. Michelle Leet, who was a NAACP representative in Fairfax, said of anti-CRT protesters like you to let them die.
Let's prepare our children for a world they deserve. Let's deny this off-key band of people that are anti-education, anti-teacher, anti-equity, anti-history, anti-inclusion, anti-live and let live people. Let them die. You don't let these uncomfortable people.
Have you heard about, I'm sure you've heard about this.
Yeah, I read the story when I think Luke Rosiak from the Daily Wire put out that story or broke that story around midnight or so. Thursday, I guess, Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah.
And I just laughed. I actually thought it was great.
And that's kind of interesting, right? Because we're constantly being accused, people like yourself, people who are engaged in this war against critical race theory and equity policies being pushed into the American school system, are constantly being accused of you're the bigot, you're the racist, you just don't want American children to be taught the true history of this country, and then yet we have NAACP representatives telling the public, let them die, let these protesters die, let these people that are opposed to critical race theory die. So that seems very ironic, doesn't it?
Oh, it is. And I think it's great. Personally, I'm glad she did it, because for the last year we've been posting, publishing, putting out, calling out the NAACP for all the wretched involvement in our county, and they've colluded with the Arlington, Fairfax, and Prince William County NAACP chapters to go after Thomas Jefferson High School in Alexandria to dumb down their admissions and get rid of merit-based admissions process. We've got that on video. So what this does is it underscores what we've been saying for a year, and I hope more people like yourself will be willing to bring this to light, because what a lot of people don't realize is how involved the NAACP is in overturning our educational system across the country. The national NAACP actually has a 2-point educational agenda that they've rolled out to every single NAACP chapter across the country to flip our educational system.
And that's actually something I wanted to talk to you about, because I don't know the whole story. Actually, let me give the viewers a little background. The reason that I brought you on, right, was because I'm currently working on a documentary. I feel as though what's happening in Loudoun County, Virginia, is very important. It's very relevant. It's been called on, by the mainstream media, by social commentators. Loudoun County has been called the forefront of the battleground of the American culture wars, but yet I feel like the story isn't being told in an honest way. There are bits and pieces of the story, but I really want to understand what's happening. How did this all begin, and kind of create a consistent timeline, that the American people can understand. And so I've been told, I'll have to verify this with you, but I've been told that this was started, this you could call it war. And oh, awesome! It looks like you even shared a link. See, that's why I'm so glad you're here, right? Because you can help me, understand something that I feel like has been, purposely obfuscated to the American people. I feel like this is an intentional attempt by the people pushing CRT into the school to try to obfuscate what's actually happening in Loudoun County. But I was told, and maybe you can verify this for me, Scott, that Michelle Thomas, the NAACP, representative in Loudon County, president.
She's the president. Yep.
That she was the impetus. She was the catalyst for this new equity program that LCPS has been trying to push onto your schools. Tell us about that. I mean, tell us what you know about that.
So as much as I would love to give every element of credit to her, because I think she's a despicable human being, if you go back to 2015, her predecessor, a guy named Philip Thompson, who was the president of the NAACP, was petitioning the school board. I put out a post, I think it was last week, of a slide deck that I found of his from 2015, where he was asking or demanding, which is what they typically do, that a full-time equity staff be implemented. And there's a number of items that he was demanding to kind of make things right for segregation that happened 60 years ago, that finally started coming to life under Michelle Thomas. So as much as I would love to say she is the single person behind all this, she's not. But she is the one that has been able to pick up the torch and carry what Philip Thompson started.
So you really think, based on your experiences, and again, you've been at the front line of this now for what, a year and a half, 2 years? How long have you been doing this?
So I've been watching it for about 2 years, but I've been very active in calling it out for about a year.
So in your mind, the NAACP in Loudoun County has a political agenda. They have an agenda with your schools, with your children, that they're trying to push onto you, and that that this isn't just a good faith act on their part. I mean, can you? Yeah. No, you don't think so. Okay, so actually, because it seems like a lot of this was started by this report that the NAACP created, or at least submitted to the Office of the Attorney General, and this is November 18th of 2020. And I'm sure you've looked through this report.
It started before then.
Oh, it started even before that. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, it did. Right. There's a series of events. 2019 was a breakout year for the NAACP and Loudoun County Public Schools. Right. So what happened in 2019? Michelle Thomas took office on January the 12th. Okay. February 2nd, Governor Blackface comes out. Right. And she loses her mind and demands his resignation. And then February 6th, Attorney General Mark Herring comes out as blackface. Oh my God. Then February 22nd, the Madison Trust Elementary School fiasco went down, where I believe it was one or two gym teachers that did a runaway slave game lesson. And she lost her mind. It garnered national attention. The Black Panthers came on site. They forced their way into the school to talk to or demand that the principal fire the teacher. And it gained national attention, right? Because we were racist and bigoted and all that kind of stuff. It just underscores how awful Loudoun County is. But that was all farce, right? It was staged, right? Because the runaway slave lesson was actually a sanctioned and approved lesson by the state of Virginia, adopted by, it was a usable lesson or exercise by the county. There were tweets. I don't have them. I think another person has them, but there were tweets from the school principal, praising the gym teachers for what they did, right? And this was before Michelle Thomas got involved. The principal thought it was a great lesson, right? And here's the ironic thing: is the teacher that had to leave because she was being threatened. Her life just became miserable. She's actually a liberal. And she was actually carrying the social justice message forward.
Uh-huh. So it sounds like this lesson, right? And I'll make sure that, you know, we provide sources so the viewers, and like you said, those tweets, we'll find those tweets so the viewers can actually see what's happening. But what school
Sure.
did you say this was happening, that this happened in, this event?
Madison Trust Elementary.
So in Madison Trust Elementary, it seemed like this teacher, this liberal teacher, she was attempting to do an event, an exercise which would educate the kids, you know, which would give them some sympathy, right, for what you know, the history of our country, you know, what slaves had to go through during those times. And so the event was meant to educate in a positive way, you know, in a way that helps children understand. In other words, she wasn't racist. She didn't have this racist intent.
Wow.
You know, she was
No,
trying to show, she was trying to offer a perspective. Is that correct?
Well, exactly. Now, whether you agree with the basis of what the lesson plan is about is a different story, but her intentions were not to denigrate Black students.
Right, right. But the NAACP presented it, you know, and you know, let's say the social justice advocates presented it as if you have this racist teacher. You know, she's having her students run away, you know, from the white plantation owners, you know, and they're chasing her with whips, you know, chasing the student, you know. In other words, they present it in this very disingenuous, bad faith way that really has nothing to do with what the lesson was about. Is that correct?
Yeah. Now, it was all choreographed, and this is why I say that, right? I don't know where you live, but in Loudoun County, I can't tell you the last time Black Panthers ever showed up around here.
Right.
So that's just, keep that in the back of your mind. Also, keep in the back of your mind that in January, Loudoun County actually contracted with the Equity Collaborative, right, which is a consulting group. But they've only claimed that they contracted with them in March or April as a result of this runaway slave thing. And the idea of the Equity Collaborative was they brought them in to do an equity assessment to let us know how racist we were, or are, apparently.
Right.
And the Equity Collaborative conducted some, you know, basic interviews, and they put out a final assessment on June 6, 2019, which is when I started watching things more closely.
Okay.
Now here's the irony. How did the Equity Collaborative know that the runaway slave incident was going to take place, and therefore prompt the need for an equity assessment in January when the runaway slave incident happened in mid-February? That's number one. Number two, the founder of the Equity Collaborative, the organization that did the equity assessment, is a guy named Jamie Almanzin. And Jamie Almanzin worked with Glenn Singleton at the Pacific Education Group. Why is that relevant? Because the Pacific Education Group for many years charged schools around the country $30,000 plus to conduct Underground Railroad simulations of students. So we go through this exercise at Madison Trust in mid-March. We hire the Equity Collaborative in January, and the guy that owns it and founded it actually participated and sold services around the very thing that Michelle Thomas was protesting.
Okay. That's interesting, and we'll have to. So you said that they were doing simulations of the Underground Railroad, so that these kinds of events, or what did you call it, choreographed, like a choreographed lesson?
Well, no, I think the everything that transpired from February forward was choreographed.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So you think that this goes a little deeper than, you know, some event that had just happened to cause, you know, to bring the outrage of the NAACP and the media into the public spotlight. So
100%.
actually, I actually want to go through this a little bit, because again, this report that the NAACP had admitted to the Commonwealth of Virginia in November, it makes some claims about what was going on in the Loudoun County schools, you know, over the past several years or over the past decade. And it was titled The Equity Assessment. It says the equity assessment reported pervasive inequities division-wide in LCPS, including the following: a low level of racial consciousness and racial literacy, discipline policies that disproportionately and negatively impact students of color, particularly Black African-American students, racial slurs, insults, or racially motivated violent actions towards Black African, Latinx, and Muslim students. And then there was actually specific reports, or specific accounts by parents. Here's one. The most recent incident: my son was pushed against a lunch table, told he looked like the donkey from Shrek, and called the N-word 5 times. He did not feel comfortable reporting this to the assistant principal. And then in another account, it says, I'm an LCPS graduate from 2012. Every day at school, just about someone or group were making racial comments to others. It was the norm of being a Black kid in Loudoun County. I even got in-school suspension after being called a Blackie Chan and being told to go back to Africa. So this report makes all these claims, right? It's making all these claims about, how unfairly, the Loudoun County administration was treating African-American students, and also the way that students were, other students were treating African, minorities. And, the way this report makes it sound, racism was just an endemic, horrible problem, in Loudoun County. What is your perspective on it? I mean, is some of this true? Is it complete fabrication? Was it really as much of a problem? What's your perspective on that?
So here's what I would say. Loudoun County has approximately 82,000 students.
Okay.
And I would argue that you can go to any school district in the country, and there's going to be a Black kid, a white kid, an Asian kid, whatever, that experiences some form of racial hatred, right? But not all 82,000, right? The student population, the Black student population in Loudoun County is 7%. Not all 7% have experienced this, not even close, not even a fraction. They interviewed 24 or 48 students in total. And what you won't also find in that report is any interviews of white students, okay? When my son was in middle school for 3 years, he was targeted. He was targeted because he was white, blonde hair, blue eyes. He was targeted by Blacks, Muslims, and Asians. Where did that go? That went nowhere, right? I fought with his school for 3 years. They didn't interview it. They only interviewed the people. They only want to paint a narrative that they want to paint. Now, I'm not saying that these kids that you referenced didn't experience what they experienced, and I'm sorry that they did. They never should have. But I think anybody in this country would be a fool to think that there is a community in this country that doesn't have some form of an individual, 2, 10, that are morons and say stupid things. But unless you bring to the table evidence that 50% or some god awful number is conducting these this sort of behavior, to flip an entire school system and the educational system based on a large handful, say 50 kids, I don't know, that have experienced some problems, is ridiculous. I didn't demand that the school flip the educational system because my son was targeted for 3 years. It's subjective. And the other thing that you'll find is the language is quite similar. Now the complaint that Michelle Thomas in the NAACP filed, the timing is interesting, right? Because on March the 11th, May 10th, 2019, right after the runaway slave, after they hired the Equity Collaborative, she met with Attorney General Mark Herring, along with some other Black leaders in Leesburg, Virginia. Then what happens? 2 weeks later, she files this complaint against Loudoun County Public Schools that claims we're racist and discriminatory and all this kind of stuff. And then on June 6th, the final assessment report comes out from the Equity Collaborative. Ironically, some of the language in the report from the Equity Collaborative is very similar to the complaint filed with the Attorney General. Now, one of the things that she focuses on in that discrimination complaint is Black students were discriminated against from the academies of Loudon. Now, here's what I find interesting, is the academies of Loudon opened up in September 2018, okay? That was the first year. So in 2019, in May 2019, that first year hadn't even been completed yet, and she's filing discrimination accusations at that school for not allowing the proper number of Black students to be admitted. So, if you want to, cry racism and discrimination against the school for not admitting Black students, let there be a track record, right? Let's establish a pattern here. The first year of schools open is not a track record. It's not a pattern. It doesn't show anything, right? Subsequently, so there was a low number of Black students that applied to get into the academies of Loudon.
Yeah.
The woman that was at the basis of the complaint, Robin Burke, said her son was rejected because he was Black. That first year was open. Well, I've got news for her and for whoever watches this. My son was rejected at the same time her son was rejected. And guess what? He was white, and he still is. I didn't claim discrimination. You know what he did is he buckled down and he made it last year, and he graduated high school this year. That is what you do. You don't turn to the courts and say, I was discriminated against because my son didn't get in. Prove it.
Yeah, and let's actually get into that, because it seems like as a result of this report, or as a result of NAACP's, I guess, activism in the LCPS program, they then are changing the curriculum to accomplish equity. And for the viewers that don't know, equity is this idea, as opposed to equality. Equality in the American experiment is this idea that everyone gets an equal opportunity, right? Is that everyone gets the same chance to succeed, but your ability to succeed is based on your own merit, which is why it's also sometimes called meritocracy. Equity is the opposite. Equity demands that a specific result, right? And so the NAACP demanded we need more Black representation within the Loudoun County schools. And so they go about this because, as you said, some of the admission requirements were competitive. And it says so here in this report that there was students are offered admissions through a competitive process. And so it was a competitive process, and they had many different admissions criteria. And I'll show this actually in this video. I'll show the criteria. The report lists it. And it's just fascinating because this is all in the report that the NAACP filed, that as you go through the report, it shows how the criteria is changing year by year. And by year 4, they've eliminated most of the criteria that they were using to make their admissions competitive. They've eliminated most of it. They've dumbed it down so that everybody can get in, right? So that so that they can achieve their equity. But at what cost, right? I mean, I think we probably all agree that trying to just dumbing down the admissions just so that we can get this artificial number of artificial diversity of students, that's probably not going to create the best students, right? That's probably not going to create the most educated leaders of America's future. It's fascinating to me that people think this is okay. But anyway, go ahead.
You know what? I'm going to backtrack, but I'm going to respond to something you just said, because what is completely ironic is, yes, this was their stance. This was their stance. We've got to make it fair and equitable and all this stuff. So they had these changes made. Don't you know that the Black student admission, enrollment, and acceptance went down by 2 points?
Oh, did it?
Yeah. So much for that stupid plan. It backfired.
So you're saying really it didn't even work? I mean, they go through all this trouble, eliminate, and again, I will show proof of this in the video. I mean, it's in the report that they are eliminating these major portions of the admissions criteria, and you're saying it didn't even work. It didn't work. No, they put out the numbers in
early June. Yeah, I just sat there and laughed because look, if a kid wants to do it, they're going to do it. It doesn't matter what color they are, right? But their insistence. In fact, the highest percentage of increase of Black students in AOL came last year before they dumbed things down. So they dumb things down to make it easier, and what happens? It goes in the reverse direction.
Right.
Like everything these they want to do, they claim their intentions are good. It backfired, and I think it's hysterical. There's something else that's important to note. In 2019, so Michelle Thomas, while she's the NAACP president, She's also the president of Loudon Freedom Center, Holy and Whole Ministries, and as of March the 11th of this year, she is the president of the Virginia Hemp Project. The Loudon Freedom Center entered into a contract with Loudoun County Public Schools in April 2019. That was to go through August 2020, but that was extended because of COVID. Now, the basis of this contract is conducting field trips for students to a slave cemetery that she was given for free in 2017. Okay, it's like 3 to 5 acres, and there's all these, it's preserved for historical site, and slaves are buried there. So the field trip was to take the students. She was getting paid $34,000 by the county to take students on a field trip to a cemetery that has slaves in it that she was given for free. And here's the kicker. The contract is signed and countersigned, signed by her, countersigned by Ashley Ellis, who is a radical assistant superintendent in this county. And in this statement of work, the last sentence says the field trip services are to be provided with the schools that have the highest Black student population. What is that? That sounds like and smells like discrimination to me.
So actually, after this report was filed, right, and this new equity program was implemented into LCPS, how long after that was the first major event after that? Beth Barts' now infamous private Facebook group, which was called, what was the Facebook group called? Stop.
Anti-Racist Parents of Loudon.
Okay, so it was called Anti-Racist Parents, and I've actually made a video on this whole, because anti-racism is not what you'd think, and this is very much part and parcel of the kind of modern progressive tendency to use obscure the actual meaning of words or to use loaded language. And so, for example, Antifa, anti-fascist. So you might see anti-fascist and think, of course, I'd love to be anti-fascist, but then, what's actually happening are masked people, throwing Molotov cocktails through store windows and such, right? And so when you hear the word anti-racist, you automatically assume, it just means you're against racism. But no, actually, anti-racism is a much deeper and kind of more insidious ideology that you have to look into, and that goes with any of this critical race theory stuff. Do not just trust what you hear on the surface level. That critical race theory is just a lens by which to view history. No, it's not. I mean, that may be one part of it, but it is actually a very there is a ton of philosophy behind it that has all kinds of assumptions about the nature of reality. We talked about one earlier, the difference between equity and equality, or this idea of the oppressor and oppressed dialect that comes from Marx. But anyway, so she starts this Facebook group called Anti-Racists of what is it? Anti-Racist of Loudon.
Anti-Racist Parents of Loudon.
And in this group, in this private Facebook group, she's targeting people like you, people like Ian Pryor, is that his name?
She targeted me, my organization, my family,
okay,
and my employer right out of the gate. I was the first one that she targeted.
And she's targeting all these parents who are really, based on my examination of this, good faith actors. They're coming to school board meetings. They're expressing their concern about some of this ideology, and that's exactly what it is: ideology being pushed into the Loudoun County curriculum. And she's targeting them in this Facebook group. And when this comes out, right, there's some kind of whistleblower, someone starts taking screenshots of this and sharing it. The community is outraged. I mean, it explodes.
Member of this board and others associated with LCPS have participated in the formation of a third-party group, Anti-Racist Parents of Loudoun County, or as I like to call them, Chardonnay Antifa. The purposes of this group is to identify and target parents or community members opposed to specific school policies, critical race theory, to name but one. This school system, having engaged through a proxy group the creation of a political hit list designed to suppress the First Amendment rights of Loudon parents, is both wrong and dangerous. Parents should never be subjected to retribution for simply expressing concerns about their children's curriculum.
But the fact that you have in your employ and on our school board those who do not only agree with discrimination, but go so far as to condone or participate in the witch hunt of citizens for voicing their opinion is unbelievable.
Right. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So in early February, I really started putting the heat on Beth Barts because of her stupid comments.
Right.
Denying critical race theory existed, this, that, the other thing. And then I put out a post on February 25th about the cancellation of Dr. Seuss. Thankfully, the next day, Chrissy Clark from the Daily Wire picked up that story, and then it went, global. And then I continued to lay, keep the foot on the gas on Beth Barts with her stupid comments, because she came out after John Beatty, who's a school board member, that in mid to late February came out and said critical race theory is, in fact, in our school system. So she wanted to have him censured.
Okay,
And
wait a
so
minute. So you said John Beatty?
Yeah.
Okay, and he was, I've heard a lot about John Beatty. He was actually a member of the school board. Is this correct?
He still is, yeah.
He still is, and a lot of parents were saying this is the only guy on the school board we can trust. Like, this is the only member of the school board that's honest, right? That was the perspective of a lot of the parents. So you're saying he came out with information that proved that CRT was being taught in the Loudoun County curriculum. Is that correct?
Yeah. So in the August, September 2020, I was going after every school board member, including John.
Okay.
Because of their support for all this stuff. And then in early January, he and I had a conversation, and he was the smart one. I mean, sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire, and he took it upon himself to read, books by James Lindsay, dive into articles and things by Chris Rufo to really understand critical race theory. And during our discussion, he said, "Look, I'm sorry, I missed the mark on this.
I was wrong. I was wrong. Yeah, right. These people had me fooled. I was wrong." Right.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he kept carrying the torch, and then in mid-February there was a board meeting, and he made the proclamation: critical race theory is being taught in our schools.
Right.
Much to the surprise of all the other board members, they didn't like that. So Beth Barts wanted to have him censured.
And by the way, Loudoun County, the president has consistently denied over and over that critical race theory is being taught in the schools. But the problem with this stringent denial that critical race theory is being pushed into the Loudoun County school system is that you guys just have so much evidence to the contrary, and that they've essentially admitted themselves. I watched a video on your YouTube channel, on your your PACT YouTube channel that you have, which I will include the link. Everyone should check it out, where Beth Barts admits in a public meeting that it is being taught. She says, well, our lessons aren't technically critical race theory, but we might be teaching it inadvertently. It's like, come on, right? I mean, she's just blatantly admitting we're taking and it's really interesting, the ideas that come from critical race theory, as I mentioned before, the oppressor-oppressed dialect, this idea of whiteness as a metaphysical concept that's evil, and that all white people essentially are have in us like this sinful concept almost. All of these, there's so many ideas. Privilege is another great one. The privilege theory comes straight out of critical race theory, intersectionality, and many others. These ideas that come from CRT, that were created within the CRT framework, the philosophy, those are what are being pushed on the schools and into the curriculum. And then people say, oh, we're not teaching CRT. Well, just because you're not reading from the works of, say, Derek Bell, right, or Kimberly Crenshaw, just because you're not reading out of a textbook made for people in college, doesn't mean you're not teaching critical race theory, right? In the same way that just because you're not reading, if you were to teach something, for example, if you were to teach about Jesus, for example, if you were to teach about Jesus, and you're providing a story about something that happened, but you're not quoting the Bible. That doesn't mean you're not teaching Christianity. Do you see what I'm saying? If you're still teaching a story about something that happened in the Bible, even though it doesn't, if you're not quoting something in John or Mark, that doesn't mean you're not teaching from the Bible. Okay. And so this is the problem with critical race theory. I mean, this is the problem with the way this dialogue has happened, is that these people stringently deny that critical race theory is being taught in American schools, and it happens over and over, but it is being taught. And this is actually something that's fascinating, is that the parents themselves have recognized this. It feels like the parents of Loudoun County themselves have gone through unbelievably great lengths to try to understand what's going on and expose this. And something you hear over and over again is, a snake by any other name is a snake. A bird by any other name is a bird. Let's quit mincing language. But let me ask you, why do you think the school is going through so much? The school board, for example, is going through such trouble to deny that they're teaching it. Why is there such a stringent denial? What do they benefit by denying that they're teaching it? What do you think that means?
I think it all comes down to power and money, right? I mean, if you look at 2 counties in Virginia recently have voted to not adopt the state's required transgender policy, they're going to have financial repercussions over that. And I applaud what they did. They can figure it out, but they took the right stand. Our superintendent, I call him Professor Ziegler because I don't know what kind of doctor he is an idiot. He's a bold-faced liar. And it's evident because we've demonstrated that time and again. I took out a full-page ad yesterday in the Loudoun Times-Mirror with the invoice that was sent by the Equity Collaborative to Loudoun County Public Schools with a line item that says, focus on critical race theory development. Okay, that's pretty clear, right? And then the same organization that built them, the Equity Collaborative, the basis of their framework for teaching is called critical race theory, right? Which is what Loudoun County is spending $1 million on, over the last year, 2 years, whatever it is. Those words, not my words, is their words.
So why are they so allergic to that term? I guess that's what I'm asking. Why do they want to deny that? Why is that?
Because it's garnered a lot of negative attention across the country. Simply put, that's it. And when they take heat, when people like that, radicals like that, take heat over terminology, they have to pivot. Right. So what they've pivoted to, Loudoun County, is calling it a culturally responsive teaching or framework. Now, ironically, in the same invoice, culturally responsive teaching framework is the next line item down underneath critical race theory. And
it's kind of funny too, because culturally responsive teaching is still the acronym is CRT, right? And so it's like, wow, you guys, you're not even doing a really good job of hiding it,
No, and where they're very disingenuous is there's also another factor here, right? So I think it was last year, the Virginia Department of Education Office of Superintendent put out a memo statewide to all superintendents, memo 050 and 050-19. And in the bottom of that, and it was about critical race theory. And in the bottom of that memo, it glorifies critical race theory and highlights the fact that they need to continue developing and teaching the tenets of critical race theory.
This was a public memo? This was public?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to my Stop LCPS website and you go to the search, type in memo, and it should come up.
And what was the date of this? The date that this happened?
I think it was last year or maybe the year before.
Okay, so
it may have been 2019.
So there's this memo that comes out where they're just admitting, essentially the memo just admits that they are teaching CRT.
Yeah, they use those 3 words.
Okay.
And further, they actually do help in the sense that as you said earlier, critical race theory is not a book, right?
Right.
It's a theory. And everything that falls underneath this theory that's getting propagated and pushed out, are tenets of critical race theory.
Right.
And that's one of the elements that they highlight in this memo, at the bottom of the memo. And cultural responsive framework, teaching, whatever you want to call it, equity, diversity, inclusion, all this nonsense, all falls under the category of critical race theory. And there's a million tenets underneath it. It's kind of like when you use the term math. What is math? Well, math could be algebra, physics, addition, subtraction, multiplication, right? There's not a book for just math. It's for a specific discipline or tenet of math. So that's how they try to skirt it. Now, admittedly, I think the biggest problem we've had in this country, we've had a ton of media. We've engaged the media. We've been in online media, on Fox News, the Newsmax, you name it, more than 200 times in the last 6 months. But the problem is, and when anybody ever talks about this stuff, the problem is the conversation stays at the critical race theory level.
Right.
It stays at white privilege. It stays at implicit bias. It stays at white supremacy. Who cares, right? What does that do? That angers people, but so what? You can't fight back on just these adjectives, right? You just can't. So what I have been working on is breaking critical race theory down into a product or a life cycle. And I'll just real quickly, if you think of what everybody's been hearing in the media, that's the beginning of the life cycle or the product, right? It's the whiteboard phase of the product. Then you go into a production or manufacturing phase of the life cycle. That comes in the form of state policy, school policy, county policy, federal policy on how to push out all this equity nonsense. The final phase of the life cycle is what I refer to as the implementation and delivery phase. This is the most important phase that people don't understand. And that's where the messaging has got to change. And that's one of the things I'm working on and hoping to do with Dr. James Lindsay next month. That part, the implementation and delivery, consists of understanding what an equity consultant is. Who is the equity consultant for your school district? Who are your equity partners, like the Southern Poverty Law Center, Learning for Justice, Racial Equity Tools? These are the people and the groups of organizations that are disseminating the lessons and materials into the schools, to the teachers for training, to the students, and then the end result is indoctrination. People need to not get angry. They need to feel pain. And when they feel pain, that will be realized at the implementation level. Then I think they'll be more emboldened to get involved, because then it's something they can identify with, as opposed to hearing all this implicit bias nonsense that we hear. We all know it's nonsense. It's a distraction and it's work, but we need to get people over into the delivery phase to understand that, to better understand and equip themselves to call out and fight against this stuff in their wherever they live.
I mean, and I think a lot of parents do feel pain. I think a lot of Americans do feel pain about hearing this stuff. I mean, there is a very visceral, yes, anger reaction, but I think there is also a cringe. It's just like a cringe when you hear some of this, because there is a lot of, I guess, propaganda being used on both sides. But one of the things you hear pretty often, maybe on conservative networks like Fox, is that critical race theory is anti-American, right? And I think a lot of people just hear that and they just wave it away. Certainly the progressives and the people, the proponents of it are denying that it's anti-American. In fact, they'll say it's very patriotic. We're looking at America through an objective lens. But no, that claim that critical race theory is anti-American is not an exaggeration, right? It's not a facetious bad faith claim. And when you actually study, and I encourage everyone to please look into critical race theory. Do not take our word for it. Don't listen to TV pundits. Go and pick up James Lindsay's book, okay? Cynical Theories with Helen Pluckrose. They go deeply into this and they cite everything. Pick up Critical Race Theory and Introduction by Richard Delgado and Gene Stefancic, rather. Look into this stuff, because critical race theory is blatantly anti-liberalism. and I don't mean liberal, liberal like the political, liberal and conservative. Liberalism, aka the founding principles of the American democracy. The ideas like equality theory, ideas like meritocracy, ideas like freedom of speech, ideas like individualism. All of these things were founded within this kind of liberal framework, that came about because of the Enlightenment era. It is explicitly against this liberal conception of reality that the West essentially, and especially the US, is founded on. And so in its rejection of liberalism and, in its inability to see people as individuals, its inability to view equality as, something positive, but instead to pivot towards equity, which again is trying to seek results instead of giving everyone the same opportunity. It's seeking that we have these very specific artificial results. We need this particular representation in every facet of American life. This is anti-American in the sense that all of the values that America was founded on, in the Constitution, are questioned and rejected by critical race theory. And please do not take our word for it. Go look it up. Go to newdiscourses.com. Check out Cynical Theories. John McWhorter is actually coming out with a new book next month called Woke Racism: How a New Religion Has Betrayed Black America. And there's plenty of people of color in Loudoun County, right? Plenty of people of color, John McWhorter, Coleman Hughes, Glenn Lowry, and countless others who have openly come out against this stuff, because it's not even helping the minorities that it's intending to help. It's extremely divisive, and it makes minorities into a victim group. And it doesn't even deny that it's doing that it makes minorities into like this oppressed victim group that just can't do anything about it because there's these systemic structures that are pushing down on them and preventing them from achieving anything. But I actually wanted to ask you about Tanner Cross. So how soon after this event with Beth Barts' Facebook group, which caused outrage, and this is actually something I'm going to cover in the documentary, is just the amount of outrage when people found out that essentially the school was targeting them and you for being opposed to some of this stuff. How long after this was Tanner Cross's speech at a Loudoun County school board, which ultimately led him to be fired?
So let me lay the groundwork for you there. So March 12th is when the call to action came out to come after us. March 22nd, there was a letter sent to the school board and school administration from a former PTA president, former equity committee person, and a former school board representative that asked to have assistance to have my GoFundMe page taken down. March 25th, my GoFundMe was taken down. March 26th, Beth Barts and the Equity Committee for Loudoun County Public Schools put out a statement on Facebook and Twitter that their goal was to silence the opposition. Okay, so that's important to remember, because they did this from their work accounts, their official accounts. Okay. Tanner Cross, I think, came out with his statement somewhere around the end of May. I think it was maybe the last week of May. And his lawsuit was filed on June 1st, and my lawsuit was filed on June 2nd.
So let's talk a little bit about what Tanner Cross was saying, and I'll play the video for our viewers so they can watch it.
My name is Tanner Cross, and I am speaking out of love for those who suffer with gender dysphoria. 60 Minutes this past Sunday interviewed over 30 young people who transitioned, but they felt led astray because lack of pushback or how easy it was to make physical changes to their bodies in just 3 months. They are now detransitioning. It's not my intention to hurt anyone, but there are certain truths that we must face when ready. We condemn school policies like 80-40 and 80-35 because it will damage children, defile the holy image of God. I love all of my students, but I will never lie to them regardless of the consequences. I'm a teacher, but I serve God first, and I will not affirm that a biological boy can be a girl and vice versa, because it's against my religion, it's lying to a child, it's abuse to a child, and it's sinning against our God.
But Tanner Cross, essentially, he, in his words, to call students by their preferred pronouns, you know, in other words, to call a biological male a female, or vice versa, violated his religious beliefs and his constitutional right to free speech. Again, something that critical race theory attacks. He, you know, in other words, he objected to this on constitutional grounds and on religious grounds, that he didn't feel that his religious beliefs were congruent with that. And he did so in a perfectly legal way, in a public forum. The school had no right to fire him over those comments. You know, he's entitled to his own opinions and beliefs. He broke no laws, and the school board, I guess, was so incensed, you know, that how dare he upset the orthodoxy, right? That they fired him. How soon after his comments did they fire him?
It was just a matter of days.
Oh, okay. So just a couple days later, you know, they can him, and then he goes to the courts. And good for him, by the way. Good for him. And I've talked to many teachers that have been fired as a result of expressing their genuinely held beliefs that this stuff is not good for their kids, not good for the children that they're attempting to educate. And even Tanner Cross, in a lot of his interviews, talks about how hurtful this was to him, because he loves his kids. He's a PE teacher. He loves his kids. You know, he really enjoys what he does, and he thinks he makes an improvement in their lives, and he connects with them. And for them to fire him because he was trying to help, you know, because he was expressing his deeply held beliefs, to him was just a betrayal. And this court case, Tanner Cross's case, has gone all the way to the Supreme Court. Is that correct?
So I don't remember the first layer that it went to, or level that it went to, but it was the judgment came down in his favor. And then that Friday after it came down in his favor, I think that was June 10th or 11th, maybe, the Loudoun County decided to appeal it. So I'm not exactly sure where it is in the appeals process.
So let me get this straight. The court ordered that Loudoun County, LCPS, had engaged in unconstitutional practices by firing Tanner Cross, and there was a court mandate to give him his job back. And they did, right? They were forced to. Their hand were forced. They gave him his job back. And then, after being told this by the government, essentially, they appealed that. In other words, they disagreed with that decision. They have tried to. They're now trying to fire him again. Is that correct? Is that it?
That's correct. So I think Tanner finished out the school year, but you know, not before the idiot superintendent had a chance to roil things up and, you know, launch an appeal.
Unbelievable. I mean, it's like, how much abuse can these people, you know, they're gluttons for punishment, right? Because there's no way that they can fire him. I mean, legally anyway. I mean, I'm sure if they had their, you know, in their perfect world in which they have, you know, authoritarian power over everyone that doesn't share their, you know, extreme progressive ideology, I'm sure they would kind of create a you know, some kind of Marxist communist utopia within the Loudoun County schools. But yeah, you know, we live in the United States. That's just not going to be allowed. So I don't even know what the point is of them trying to appeal this. And last I checked, it was going to the Supreme Court. So after the Tanner Cross incident, which is ongoing, as we've said, what the next big event, I think, was the June 22nd, the school board meeting on the transgender issue. Is that correct? Can you tell us what happened in that meeting?
Yeah, so I was outside. I wasn't inside the meeting, but I know what happened. You know, there was a lot of people. There was 255 people, I believe, signed up to speak. And, you know, there was opposition, right? There was, you know, pro-trans people there. There was more, you know, patriot type people, or non-radicals. And after Senator Dick Black spoke, Had some very strong words. It was a powerful and excellent delivery. His comments were spot on to the school board. People, I don't know how they did this, but they clapped. They clapped. They didn't use jazz.
No, they wouldn't. No, Scott, please don't say, because that might trigger people. That could cause trauma, Scott.
Apparently it did. Apparently it caused some trauma, and people were out, just beside themselves.
Oh no. Yeah. Okay. So we have to lay the groundwork for this, because again, in this June 22nd meeting, this school board meeting, they had a rule that you weren't allowed to clap. You had to instead use jazz hands, right? Because you wouldn't want to trigger anybody. You could cause PTSD. You could trigger somebody. And so the man that spoke, it seemed, I don't live in Virginia, and so I'm not, I guess I'm not inculcated in this, but the man that spoke seemed to have, just from the way people were responding to him, a very high status within the community. What was his name?
It was Senator Dick Black.
Senator Dick Black, he was the last man that spoke before they shut down this free speech, essentially, is what they did. He spoke, and in his comments, he said that he was disgusted.
I'm retired Senator Dick Black of Ashburn, Virginia. You retaliated against Tanner Cross by yanking him from teaching for addressing a public hearing of this board. The judge ordered you to reinstate Mr. Cross, because if his comments were not protected speech, then free speech does not exist at all. It's absurd and immoral for teachers to call boys girls and girls boys. You're making teachers lie to students, and even kids know that it's wrong. This board has a dark history of suppressing free speech. They caught you red-handed with an enemies list to punish opponents of critical race theory. You're teaching children to hate others because of their skin color, and you're forcing them to lie about other kids' gender. I am disgusted by your bigotry and your depravity.
Joe Mobley, to be followed by Donna Russell.
Those were the words he used. He said, "I am disgusted with what the Loudoun County School Board is doing, Loudoun County, School Board is doing." And he said, they're teaching students to hate one another, which is true. I think that's if you look at, what has been pushed into LCPS, I don't know how you could come to any other conclusion. And so he makes this very powerful speech, and the audience rightly claps. And directly after that, the board just decides, they vote to shut down all the other speakers. And there were hundreds of more speakers that still were on the schedule to speak. And so they shut down inexplicitly. Did they give a reason for why they shut it? What was their justification for shutting down this?
What was it? Decorum. Decorum.
Okay,
but
so
keep in mind, when you use jazz hands, that actually offends the deaf population.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I call her Jazz Hands Sheridan. She didn't realize that what she was doing was offending an entirely different population that she doesn't even consider as part of the whole equity, movement. Yeah,
it just becomes hard to please everybody, doesn't it? It'd be so they shut. And here was the interesting thing about that meeting, because from what I was told about this June 22nd meeting on the transgender issue, was that the Loudoun County School Board had bussed in people from outside the county. Is that correct? That they had bussed people in to?
No, they had planned to. They were collecting money, and they were putting out posts and statements to recruit people from the DC metro area, but not one bus made it in.
Okay. And what I found interesting, and again, this is a public record, though it's, to me at least, it's very suspicious that if you watch the live stream, because the Loudoun County, the LCPS is forced, by constitutional law to release the minutes of their meeting, right? To release a public live stream. But the live stream itself, if you watch it, most of it is censored. Most of it, as the audience, you cannot see what's happening. You can only see what's happening during, the official points of comment. But when they recess the board, which happens ironically for most of the meeting, it's in recess. They cut the stream. The viewer can't actually see what's happening. So I only know what's happening based on, the accounts I've heard from people like you and in the media. But you literally are not allowed to see what's happening when the board is, quote unquote.
Can't hear you anyway.
Oh, you can't.
I can hear you now, but I didn't hear your last statement.
Okay, so what I was saying is that you couldn't hear what was happening when the board was in recess, right? The official live stream. Go ahead.
They went back behind the curtain.
Yes. Okay. And in the meantime, there's chaos. There's just absolute chaos happening in the main area. People are arguing, and there's people are demanding their chance to speak, of course. But what I found interesting was that at the beginning of this meeting, the first 10, 15 people to speak were all, it almost seemed as though the school board had, they had planned it so that the first people speaking would be, for the new transgender policy. What was the policy called?
Policy 8040.
Yeah, so that they would be, that they had manipulated the speaker lineup so that the first people able to speak would be, for it. But after those first 15 people or so, I mean, every single person that spoke was against it. I mean, they were all against 8040. They were all very horrified and gave good reasons why. And then eventually,
so
like you said,
let's set the tone for what you just said, right? Because what you said is spot on. So if you go back a week prior to the meeting, that's when post and recruitment started coming out to get people bussed in. Okay. The school board typically releases an active link for people to sign up and register on the Friday before that Tuesday meeting. However, to nobody's awareness, they released it Thursday, which was out of the norm.
Mm-hmm.
So, and nobody knew about it, right? They just did it. So to your point earlier, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck, right? So you got these people trying to recruit people to bus them in to disrupt or whatever they wanted to do at this board meeting. Then they just open up the board meeting an entire day early than any other standard or any other point in time.
And
coincidence? I don't think so.
So then, after they shut down public comment, after you said Senator Black, is that his name?
Yes, Senator Dick Black.
Yes, Senator Black speaks, gives a kind of a chilling account of his perspective of what's happening in Loudoun County. And they shut down speech because people were clapping, God forbid, how dare they, how dare they clap. And then the meeting devolves into chaos. Is that correct? I mean, based on what you've heard, you said you were outside. What happens after that?
So chaos, I think came towards the end, but it broke out. They broke out in song.
Okay.
Like the national anthem, and I think maybe they had one or two other songs. Somebody was trying to bring in a bullhorn so that they could finish their public comments. And then the superintendent declared, I can't remember the exact terminology, but insubordination or something, to have the law enforcement remove people. Otherwise, they'd be charged with trespassing.
And people,
right?
And some people refused to leave because they felt like their constitutionally protected right to speak was being violated. Is that
correct?
And they told the police that the people that the police should be arresting are the school board members who are shutting down people's right to speech without giving really any good explanation or account people clapping is not, traditionally considered a good reason to shut down a school board meeting. And so go ahead.
No, I was going to say no. There was one arrest at that meeting, right? It looks like there was two, but there was really one. The one gentleman that refused to leave, he was taken outside, but he wasn't actually arrested. There was another gentleman that was arrested, and his story is quite tragic. There's involvement. There was a woman, a girl in Loudoun County about 2.5 months ago, maybe, that was sexually assaulted. It's so, I'm going to leave the details out.
Okay.
But she was sexually assaulted by a transgender. Okay. And the man that was taken to the ground was the father of the victim. And he was being taunted by a woman that was behind him that knew of the details of his daughter. And so he was arrested. And upon his arrest, taken down to the sheriff's office, they, hey, what happened? What's going on? Why were you acting like this? Then the story came out, right? So he then relayed all the details to law enforcement about what happened. Now you might be saying, or your viewers might be saying, okay, so if this happened in school, why was there no arrest, or why wasn't it turned over to the sheriff's department? And the answer to that is, last year, the state of Virginia passed HB 257. It went into effect July 1st of last year. And basically what HB 257 does, in a summary, is if there is a reportable incident, and I have this posted on my website, you can see what the anything you can think of is considered a reportable incident. It's at the discretion of the principal as to whether or not they turn it over to the police.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. Was it a student that was assaulted, or was it a parent?
It was a student that was assaulted by a trans student.
Okay, and it's fascinating because in the June 22nd meeting over this transgender bill 8040, this was one of the concerns that parents were citing. Their opposition to the bill was based on their concern that their daughters could be attacked. That if their daughters are sharing the same bathrooms, hotel rooms, gym locker rooms, etc., with a transgender student, that their daughters wouldn't be safe. I mean, conceivably, the reason that we have segregated bathrooms in the first place is to protect women. It's not to protect men, right? It's to protect women. And so the parents in this meeting were expressing their concerns that this new policy that LCPS was trying to implement would make their daughters unsafe. And then you're saying essentially that it happened, that
and the people in the room don't even realize it.
And so this girl was attacked. How old was she? Do you know? Are you able to share that?
High school.
She was okay. So she was a high school girl. She was attacked. And what did the school do about it? I mean, did they do anything about it? Did they just deny that it was happening? And what was the reaction?
There was none. There was no report filed. Okay. The Commonwealth attorney in our county who needs to go, and there's an active recall petition that we were involved in with Stand Up Virginia to get her removed. She declined to investigate. Okay. So under this HB 257, this student was sodomized. Okay. That's pretty. Just
on the school grounds. This happened, in the school,
in the school bathroom,
and the school board has failed to file a report.
They're not obligated to. It's what happens under this bill that a lot of people. I'm really trying to elevate the awareness of it, because it's really either people just, a lot of times people just dismiss a lot of this politics stuff because it seems too heavy. But under this bill, HB 257, actually it's an amendment to an existing statute. It basically allows the principal, and if need be, the superintendent, to act as judge, jury, and executioner.
Wow.
So for example, if little Billy goes into school on Monday and assaults a math teacher, punches him in the mouth, knocks him out, little Billy, then the principal calls the police. Little Billy gets arrested, and normal legal action ensues. On Tuesday, little Johnny does the same thing to another math teacher. The principal doesn't have to feel obligated to report it to the police. So you have two identical situations that are not equal outcomes. It's not equitable, and the onus is on the principal as to what decision they want to make. Now, the basis or the logic behind this is all this nonsense related to school, to the school to prison pipeline reduction.
Okay, so let me get this straight. So you said this bill, HB 257, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that the purpose of this is to give the president of the school, principal of the school, this administrative power to make decisions that should be above his pay grade, essentially, to act as, like you said, judge, jury, and executioner, in order to prevent kids from going to jail. I mean, that's the explanation.
Yeah, and to add to that, there's also an immunity clause within the bill that prevents them from any civil liability.
I mean, just the way you're describing it, right? It sounds dystopian. I mean, I'm reminded of Judge Dredd. If you guys have ever seen that old movie, there's a remake of it, a more recent remake. But to give one person this kind of power, to supersede the law, over a spurious idea of, well, we're trying to put less kids in jail. But the problem is that, as you said, I guess it works both ways, because he can also, the principal can also choose not to report or not to take action on a student being attacked or assaulted, or any other thing, I guess, if they have this kind. So HB 257, it's not pending. You're saying that this is passed. HB 257 is the legal standard, I guess, for the schools.
Yeah, I'll put a link in. So I found a lawyer that does an excellent job of summarizing it in 3 minutes.
But here's what they did. If a crime occurs in the school, on the school property, or on a school bus, that is in the neighborhood of sexual assault in general, alcohol and drug violations, firearm violations, if one of those types of crimes occur in that building or on a school bus, the principal does not have to report that to law enforcement. That's what they did. And they said that the reason that they wanted to do that is to cut down the pipeline from kids going from school to prison. But if your daughter gets sexually assaulted on a school bus by another student, the principal has discretion not to report that to law enforcement. Does that make your daughter more safe?
But
Okay.
I also have
share that.
links to the existing statute and the amendment HB 257.
And-
Go
ahead.
as a result of 257, right, this incident with the girl was not reported to authorities. And I mean, that's rape, that's sodomization. I mean, that should be reported. But the problem, the families retain legal counsel, and I hope to God that either the family or their legal counsel comes out with a public statement before August the 10th, because August the 10th is when the school board will vote to approve policy 8040. Now that even gets complicated, which we can touch on it if you want, but if you think about, when you look at that link and you look at the, I don't know if I put it in there. Yeah, in the article, in the link I just sent you at the very last sentence, all LCPS principles. If you
Okay.
click there, click on that, and you'll be able to see all of the quote unquote reportable offenses.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
Yeah, well, there's nothing. So put the whole trans problem aside for a moment. This is like open season. This is like Purge or The Purge.
Right. Yeah. The movie. You're talking about the movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like when you think of your kid's safety, obviously, your daughter in sexual assault, I mean, that's the last thing you want to hear about. But if you got, boys, girls, whatever, and you put sexual assault to the side for a moment, there's a whole world of things out here that are just, will embolden kids that either may not have acted out on an impulsion or a desire, but they're protected in the event that they want to do so.
They're protected. You mean if the principal decides not to report it, if the principal decides not to
exactly
take action?
Now,
Yeah,
they could be rolling the dice. But
go ahead.
they could be rolling the dice with the decision they might make because it could backfire and the principal could turn out to report it. But the fact that there's a 50-50 chance,
Mm-hmm.
that improves the odds of somebody wanting to do wrongdoing and getting away with it.
So I'm actually really glad. I mean, this is why I'm really happy I brought you on, because I didn't even know about this. I didn't even know about HB 257. I didn't know about what's going on in the fight against that. About, like you said, about this girl who was sexually assaulted, raped at the school, and because the media is not reporting this. I mean, this is the exact reason I'm interested in, in what's going on in Loudoun County, because the media is just doing such a poor and irresponsible, really, I think, irresponsible job of telling the American people what's actually happening, because it goes so much deeper.
In all fairness, though, the media is unaware of this.
Oh, they're
because
not.
It was not a reported incident.
Okay.
And I'm not necessarily a huge fan of all the media, but
Right.
The sheriff's department didn't even have the details until after the father was arrested. Like,
Wait. The father was arrested?
The father was the gentleman in the video that you saw taken to the ground with his belly, and he had a bloody lip.
Is it John Tiggs?
No, that John Tiggs was
Tiggs.
the guy that didn't want to leave because of his First Amendment.
Yeah.
So he was taken to the parking lot. He wasn't actually arrested.
So what was the name of the guy that was in this video? He was taken down. I'm
going to leave that out.
You're not going to say his name. Okay. So, but had this already happened prior to the meeting?
What, his daughter?
His daughter. Yeah.
It happened like 2.5 months ago.
Okay. So it happened in May, and
somewhere around May, the family was set, all three of them,
okay,
brave girl, to come out, and they were all signed up to address the school board.
During this June 22nd meeting, they were all going to use their time. They would have had 3 minutes total, 1 minute each. Is that correct?
Correct.
And they were going to use their 3 minutes to bring this attention to the public, what had happened to this poor girl. And they were denied that opportunity because fascism, that's how I'm going to present it. You can, I guess, come to your own conclusions, but the board shut down free speech because people were clapping. And the father is understandably outraged because he now is denied the opportunity to let the public know, and his daughter is denied the opportunity to let the public know what happened. Is that correct?
Yeah, but that wasn't the basis for his, for him being arrested. The basis for him being arrested was being taunted since the very beginning of that meeting by a woman behind him that knew of the details of his daughter's incident. So she was good, and she's for the whole trans thing. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So
I don't know if this was planned. I don't know. I'm not going to come up with a conspiracy theory. Right. I'd like to just think, that this woman is such a disgrace that she needs to be, as soon as this goes public, this woman she's got to go public, because she's an absolute pig, a disgrace. To do something like this to some man or woman or their family, knowing what happened to their kid, just to get him pushed to the point where he lost his mind. And who could blame him?
Oh, who could blame him? I mean, it's
right.
It's horrifying. And who can imagine what his daughter's going through? Now, have they taken her out of school? I mean, is she being homeschooled now? Is that?
I don't know what they're going to be doing in the fall.
Okay.
So, I mean, the school year was over at that point, but I don't know what their plans are for the fall.
Wow. And do you have, because you said like this hasn't been made public yet, do you have an article about this on your website, or is this something that you haven't really written about or brought into the public attention yet?
I haven't brought it into the public attention. How do I know about it? I know about it from a friend of the family. I know about it from an individual that's in law enforcement, familiar with the situation. And I also know some of the background as a result of a post that the mother put on a Facebook chat.
Okay.
It wasn't overly detailed, but it confirmed the things that I had that I told you, that the story came out after her husband was arrested, came out with the sheriff's department. And I believe an investigation or charges were last week or were coming out this week, but I haven't seen anything about it. And I'm just hoping to God the attorney that they have, leave the names out. We don't need to know who the people. I know their names, but that's not relevant.
It's not relevant.
The attorney, I'm hoping, comes out and makes a statement and blows this entire county in the state policies up and sues the hell out of anybody and everybody. Well, because this man's reputation was also tarnished, right? He was portrayed as some crazy, whacked out, anti-trans, white supremacist guy. And he's not.
Well, I hope so too. I mean, I agree with you. I hope so too. I hope, because to me, this is one of the consequences of, policies like 8040, like HB 257. We have segregated spaces for men and women, bathrooms and locker rooms and hotel rooms for a reason. And it's especially for children, it's for their protection. And when you take away that protection, when you take away their ability to have their own spaces, danger ensues. I mean, I think this is just a natural consequence of what happens. And I think, like you said, if this comes out, and the Loudoun County people hear about it, the American people hear about it, which I hope they do, maybe it'll start to change people's minds. I mean, maybe people start to see how dangerous this stuff can be.
That's the hope, because it's what happened to that family is just unimaginable. But I also feel like that there's a duty to have that story told, so that the other 82,000 students in this county and their parents need to know that this actually happened. They don't need to know names, but they need to know it happened.
Yeah. Well, that is a very very dark story, and I appreciate you sharing it with me. Obviously we're not going to do anything more until it becomes public and more information, as the family decides they want to share information about what happened. That's their right. But I think this is the problem with this, ironically, within this kind of woke social justice philosophy. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about this, that there's a hierarchy, right? There's a hierarchy of oppressed people, right? And so within this kind of pyramid of oppression, it used to be that women were near the top of the pyramid. But now that the trans trend has happened, and this this argument over trans rights has just exploded, they're above women, right? On this oppression hierarchy that the progressives point to, they view trans people as more oppressed than women, and therefore they think that trans people's rights should essentially supersede that of women. And so that leads to these kinds of situations where women are unsafe, or they feel unsafe or are unsafe. And like you said, anybody who speaks out against it, whether it's because they have a daughter or whether it's because they are a woman, who is opposed to this, who is afraid. They're called a TERF. They're called a transphobe. They're called bigots. They're labeled as, like you said, this gentleman was called a white supremacist. He was called hateful, and their reputations are smeared, and their lives are destroyed just because they're trying to protect their families. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think it's sad. I mean, you got 82,000 students in this county, and approximately, based on the stats that I've been able to find, that would be, I think it's like 0.07 or 0.08%, somewhere around there, of the students are trans. So that amounts to about 300 people, maybe 350 at most. So you're flipping an entire school district upside down for 300 people, right? That's not even going. Well, forget about what happened to this girl. Now there's discussions and design implementation underway to reconstruct every bathroom in this county, in the schools. We have 95 schools.
Yeah.
For 300 people, we have to do this? Really? You don't know if you should stand or sit when you pee, but you need to expect the entire county to rally around you and support. The problem with it is I would love for a conservative trans group to come out, if such a thing exists, and say, maybe there are people that have these genuine afflictions and they have to go through. Okay, fine, I'm not going to judge. But maybe come out and say, look, you're killing us. You're making us all look bad with all this ridiculous push and all this nonsense. Because I'm not passing judgment, but when you start, if you have a kid, right? Anybody has a kid, right? When they were little kids, little babies, right? You're feeding them baby food. And then as they get older, you feed them vegetables. And how many vegetables did those kids, my kids, I know, just didn't want to eat, right? You keep forcing it on them. What happens? Is that going to force the kid to love your food? No, they reject it. So by these people wanting to force the acceptance of a minority on the American people and our students and the families is going to backfire colossally in a big way. I'm not going to go out of my way, but you want me to be accepting. You're putting a gun to my head and telling me that this has to be accepted. Otherwise, that's not the way you try to get people to buy in. Not necessarily agree, but to understand. It's all through intimidation.
No, and I agree with you. And the way that it's done, like you said, is it's done in such a way that it feels like the people behind it, the people pushing trans rights, pushing critical race theory, pushing any of these kind of woke movements, they're not concerned with pragmatism. You get the feeling that they're not concerned in their minds. You either agree with what they're doing, or we don't want you on our team anyway, right? We don't want your help. You're a bigot. You're the enemy. And of course, this is such a horrible, ineffective way of convincing the American people of your cause. But I really don't think they're concerned with that. I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier in the meeting, where a Fairfax NAACP member said, "Let them die." She's saying, "Let opponents of what we're doing, of critical race theory, let them die." And she was forced to resign. Luckily, the next few days after that. But there is I don't know if you heard about this. I was thinking about doing a video on it, but there was a 60 Minutes episode that aired just, I think, last month. This was 60 Minutes episode, season 53, episode 36, and they touch on the detransitioners. And this is all the kids, all children really, who were forced, or who felt most of the time, they feel as though they were forced or they were pressured to transition because they were having they were going through something which, you know, I hate to tell you that every adolescent goes through, where they're kind of questioning their sexuality, they're unsure of who they are, and they're kind of going through this very confusing phase. And a lot of these kids were told that if they were to transition to the other sex, if they were to take these dangerous hormones and puberty blockers, and even to go through surgery, because some of them actually go through physical bottom surgery or breast surgery, that it would fix them, right? That it would fix their problem. And there was, in this 60-minute episode, you know, there were over 30. I think they had over 30 children, or, you know, people that had recently left childhood, people that were 18 or around that age, expressing their regret for what they had done, what they felt had kind of been forced on them, or at the very least that they weren't informed correctly. And so this needs to be part of the public dialogue. That studies have shown that, I think it's something like 80% of kids who go through this phase in their adolescence, where they're questioning their gender, eventually come out the other side and decide that they are the sex that the gender that they were born with, right? They identify with the biological sex that they were born with. 80%, right? I mean, that's you know, if I'm a betting man, do you see what I'm saying? If I'm a betting man, then I'm probably, if I have a child that's you know, questioning, then I'm going to bet that they're probably going to come out the other side. And so why can't we wait until they're adults, you know, for them to make this decision?
Yeah, there's no reason none. The only reason to start at the elementary age is indoctrination.
Yeah,
that is it. They're with your kids 8 hours a day. It's as simple as that. I mean, it's not really complicated, right? I mean, it's just.
So tell me a little bit about, because something else I saw happening in Loudon was that as a part of this new kind of equity CRT curriculum, they were pushing into the reading curriculum books like What Happened to Monday, right? Books that were very sexually explicit, you know, talking about things like you know, very graphic scenes. I don't even know if I want to say them on this podcast, but I'll actually share a video of the board meeting where several parents came and expressed their horror that their kids are having to see this.
Jasper wasn't even my boyfriend, just this dude I did some hacking with once in a while. He was pretty basic library systems, low security shit. Not in my league at all, but he had a big dick, and sometimes a girl just needs a big dick.
We did something. We did do something. He took a deep breath. She sucked my dick. I really didn't want it to happen. It just kind of did. Her top lip curled up. Wait a minute, is that what's really going on? She did your homework and you ate her coochie? Is that why you're crying? Because Monday's not around to do your homework no more.
What is that about? What, in your perspective, why are they pushing, you know, softcore pornography?
It's diversity, man.
I mean,
that's it. So what's really sneaky? So the books are bad enough, right? I mean, there's some, you know, just really bad stuff. You know, that meeting. So I sent an email to my kids.
What meeting was that? What meeting was that?
I don't know if it was at the end of April or early May.
Okay, I'll try to find.
I can't remember which one.
Go ahead.
But after that meeting, I sent my kids' principal at their high school an email, and I put at the very top in 96-point font, "Suck my blank." And what I put on there is I put the secretaries on there. I put every possible, you know, Christian going type person that is just uninvolved with school activities on there that I could. And the reason I did that is because that was from one of the books being taught in 9th grade. So if it's okay for 9th grade, then it sure as hell is okay for anybody that I sent that email to look at. And let them get offended. Let them complain to me. You know, I got a response from the principal. He's an idiot, but you know, I didn't expect much out of it. What I wanted to do was really offend and surprise anybody that looked at it, because that's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no reason to hold back. I don't think parents should hold back. They should send big emails with "suck my blank" all the time to the school and put everybody on there they can until they get so offended that they say, "Stop offending us." Well, great. Now maybe we can ally and get this book out of our school. But the books, what is so crazy about this, right? When you think of a school, we've got 95 schools, high schools, middle schools, elementary schools. When you think of a library in a school, like you think of that place with a bunch of books in the middle of the school where you go to for study hall or whatever, research and stuff like that, right? Now, yeah, that's still there, but every other classroom in the school is an adjunct library. The difference being is students cannot remove or check out books from the classroom libraries. So when a parent wants to do an audit or go in and review book selections in the normal library, a lot of this material isn't necessarily there. It's in the library that's kind of off to the side. So it's very mischievous how they do it. And they are softcore and some, hardcore, you might call. Yeah. I mean, some of the language, like "suck my blank."
Yeah.
What are you kidding me? And talking about, and this is 9th grade, right? And you're talking about, getting drunk, coming to school, hungover, getting drunk, getting high, taking advantage of what you're doing. Add that context to already a 9th grade kid's head in HB 257, and what you've got is a formulation for a crime in the making. Yeah.
It's pretty unbelievable. And again, that's something I want to cover in this documentary is, that these books are in the curriculum. It's kind of unbelievable. And actually they're pushing this kind of CRT onto children that are younger and younger. Christopher Rufo recently came out with an article, actually a Twitter post where he talks about this book. It's called "Not My Idea," a book about whiteness. Have you heard of it? Have you heard of this book?
It's not Kenny's new book, is it? No, because he put out a kid's book recently.
But here, I'll actually share a picture. Hopefully that picture works. I shared it in there. But it's a children's book. It's being taught in the curriculum, or is on the official reading list for children in over 30 American school districts. And it essentially equates whiteness to being a pact with the devil, right? So whiteness is a pact with the devil. I swear. And it's a contract which gets you stolen land, stolen riches, and special favors, and the ability to, quote, mess endlessly with the lives of your friends, neighbors, loved ones, and all fellow humans of color. And so this is a book being taught to children in over 30 American school districts. And the concepts of this book come directly out of critical race theory. What do you think about that? I mean, what's your take on that?
Here's the funny thing, man. When I started down this path, I would get angry. I was offended. I couldn't believe. Go in the other room and talk. You're not going to believe what I found. This is how, blah, blah, blah. I'm unfazed anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I don't care. It just I care tremendously. But it's like, I don't even know what to say.
Nothing surprises you anymore, right?
Not at all. And I hate saying it, but I think becoming numb to it is part of almost a requirement, because if you get lost in the world of getting offended and angry at all these little things, you'll never go accomplish a thing, just simply because there is so much material that one day will never, nothing should ever surprise you. It doesn't make it, I don't accept it. Come on, this is ridiculous. To go on and paint this just constant narrative of how just tremendously racist white people are and our privilege. The funny thing about it is that I love when they say white privilege, because I challenge people when everybody says it to me. Anybody says it, okay, what element of white privilege do I have? Because you realize there's over 50, right? Mm-hmm. The woman that put it together, some kook, I can't remember what her name is, and it was in the mid 80s.
Peggy McIntosh. Peggy McIntosh. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
She's got 50 elements listed.
Yeah.
I haven't seen an abridged or updated version, but there's 50 different types of examples.
And they're ridiculous. They're freaking ridiculous, the examples that she's...
Well, they are, but here's the kicker. I didn't see one in there that suggested that if I live in a house, single family home with a 2-car garage, that constitutes white privilege. It's not there. So the reason I say that is because I like to challenge people whenever it comes up, because they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, they don't. Yeah.
You know, and it's you got to have fun with them, because you're not gonna win. Like, people call you a racist and a white supremacist. It's like,
oh yeah,
you know, whatever.
So yeah, you know, the issue because I've done research into Peggy McIntosh's paper that, you know, where she essentially invents whole cloth. You know, she invents the idea of white privilege. And most people don't know that it's called privilege theory. You know, people accept that it is. I mean, they accept that white privilege is, you know, it's some kind of scientific fact, you know, objective truth about reality. No, it's not. And the problem with white privilege is that what the concept of white privilege is, what you're doing is you're pointing to statistical anomalies, right? So you might say white people are more likely to graduate, or they have a higher income, or they live longer. And so you're pointing to like statistical anomalies, or you know, statistical data, and then from that abstract data, you're pointing at an individual and saying, because on the whole, because statistically white people have these advantages, you must have these advantages, and therefore you're privileged. That doesn't work, right? Like that's not how statistics work. That's a misreading of statistics as it applies to the individual. And what I tell people is, were we to do this in reverse, let's say we take this same idea of taking statistical data and applying it to individuals. Let's say that you know, you see a black person as you're crossing the street. Statistically, black men, for example, are much more likely to commit crime than any other ethnic minority, or any other ethnic group. If we're going to use this same logic, then are we to assume that because he's a black man, you know, he's a criminal? But that's the exact same logic they're using. You know, because you're more likely to have an advantage because you're white, therefore you have privilege. You know, okay, because you're more likely to commit crime as a black man, you're a criminal. I mean, this logic doesn't work. It removes our individuality and looks at us as just a member of a collective, in this case, a white collective, which, number one, we never asked to be in. We didn't ask to be born with white skin. It wasn't our choice, right? And this is just part and parcel of this kind of critical race ideology, which removes individuality. Again, like we said, individuality is a central component of the American experiment, of the, you know, the kind of American values that the country was founded on. It removes individuality. It puts you in this group of white people that have privilege. It doesn't work like that. That's just not the way statistics work. You cannot look at an individual and assume based on statistics anything about them. You can't. I mean, you can, but if you do that, you're a bigot. I mean, you're discriminating. You're racist. I mean, is what you are.
Well, that's exactly right, man. I mean, it's a race hustle game, right? So when you think about when George Floyd was killed last year, not too long after, the NAACP put out some statistics, right? And the statistics were based on the number of black people that were killed by cops in 2019. Okay. Now, I captured that database and I went and looked at the information myself. So there's 254 people. But that's where the story starts from the NAACP, and that's where it stops.
Yeah.
Just like the statistical anomalies you were just talking about. It's, if you drill into the data, it presents the entire story.
Yeah.
But they don't want the entire story to be revealed, ever.
Exactly. And this, again, is a fundamental tenet of critical race theory. And I invite you to go. I've done a video on this. Go and read Critical Race Theory, an introduction. And within the ideology, in their minds, racism is the cause of any disparity between different groups. must be due to racism. They don't care about the evidence, right? They don't care about any other potential explanation or a multivariate analysis of okay, so you brought up George Floyd. Where's the proof that his death had anything to do with racism? To this day, I have not seen a single shred of evidence to show that his death had something to do, because of his skin color. Yes, it was police corruption. Yes, what happened was horrible. But how, Joe Biden's coming out and talking about, making a speech about, racism and white supremacy. And where's the proof that this, and actually John McWhorter, he brings up something that happened around that time, the death of Tony Tempa. Have you heard about Tony Tempa?
No, I can't remember.
So Tony Tempa is a white man who died in a very similar way around the same time. And there's video of it on YouTube. I will include a link. You could go look. The officers, they suffocate him. I mean, they put their knee on his back and he suffocates to death in front of them. And it's horrible to watch, but nobody and the mainstream media doesn't cover it. Why? Like you said, because of the race hustle. It doesn't interest people that a white man was killed by the police. That's not going to get the views. That's not going to get the press and the notoriety. And so, John McWhorter talks about this. Glenn Lowry talks about this. Coleman Hughes and so many others talk about how there is not a single shred of evidence that George Floyd's death was due to his skin color, and maybe the cop that did it was racist. But, as far as we know, he didn't have a history of racism. He did have a history of abuse. I mean, he did have a history of behavior that was unfit for a cop. But,
charge him accordingly. I don't think he was charged with a hate crime, right?
Yeah, and he should have been, put away, and he was. So, justice was done. But how do you prove that to automatically assume that what happened to George Floyd was racist? It's dishonest. I mean, you are not coming at this from a dispassionate, objective perspective. You're reading racism into something that may have a racist element, yes, but where's the proof? You cannot just assume it. And I have seen not a single shred of evidence. Have you seen any evidence that what happened to George Floyd was because of his skin color?
No, like I said, I don't think one of the charges that he was convicted of were hate crime.
Oh, you don't think it was a hate crime?
I don't think he was convicted of it.
Yeah.
I don't think those were one of the charges that he was convicted of. It was not a hate crime. If it was, okay, then there's a story about why it was a hate crime,
right? Because
then apparently there would be facts or evidence to suggest that he was a racist and it was racially motivated, but that wasn't there. It wasn't charged with that. But it's when you look at the NAACP and you look at Michelle Thomas, she's a pastor, right? There's a lot of NAACP chapter presidents around the county that are pastors, and they use their white collar as the shield and their skin color as the weapon, and that has helped to carry them forward and say whatever the hell it is they want to say without being challenged. We've got to challenge that. Right? I don't care that you have a white collar on. I don't care you have black skin. What I care about is what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. That's
the problem.
And after,
there's a lot of that.
Yeah, after George Floyd was killed, this kind of global discussion exploded about police arresting black people more often, or coming into confrontations more often. And again, the evidence, the statistics do show that, but then the question is, how do you parse these statistics? How do you view these statistics? How do you understand them, right? I mean, certainly you could look at the statistics that black people are being arrested more often than white people, or any other ethnicity. But then the question is, why are they being arrested more? And then there's all kinds of things you could point to. I mean, that you could consider, like the fact that African Americans commit more crime. I mean, I know that's not pretty. I know people don't like to talk about that, but that's a statistical fact. the fact that these happen in poor areas, and African Americans usually happen to be poorer, right, and to live in. Also, the fact that these often happen in city areas, right, like metropolitan areas. And so what I'm saying is there are thousands of different factors that come into play when looking at statistics like arrest rates, crime, how the cops interact with the civilian populace, and to simply discount everything and just say, well, it's race. It's racism. That's the only explanation. That's what CRT does. That's exactly what it does. It throws away any sort of objectivity or and just says, well, racism, and that's what they want to teach to our kids. And I mean, is that wrong? Do you think that's what they're trying to teach to our kids?
Oh, 100%. Because one of the things you'll know, what city in our country does everybody go to when they cite, Black murder statistics?
Chicago, right?
Bingo.
Yeah.
What city in the country do you know has a website devoted to tracking murders on a daily basis with different statistics based on their website? It's called heyjackass.com.
Uh-huh.
Every day it's updated with a breakdown of the latest murders, how they were committed. Was it committed by a cop? Did a cop shoot somebody? Da-da-da-da-da. It's all right there. See, they want to have these conversations. These race officers want to have these conversations about how everything is racist. But as soon as you bring up black on black crime, or 400 people have been murdered in Chicago this year alone, or whatever the number is, they deflect and they call you racist because they don't know what else to say, or they say it's because of policies, bad financial policies that were committed by Republicans. Well, that's not true. I mean, they just have to look in their district and see who's been running their cities, and we know it's Democrats. But they don't want to talk about that ever.
No.
Ever.
No.
So if you want to talk about critical race theory, my argument has always been, okay, why aren't you talking about do you remember years ago when I was a kid, in elementary school and stuff, they had like this thing called pen pals, right? Maybe somebody in Australia or Germany or wherever.
I remember that. Those were the good old days.
Those were the good old days, man. Yeah. Why isn't there any type of project or outreach with our schools to the kids in the inner city? Make a connection, try to understand, do something, offer some help, do outreach, right? They're always talking about outreach. We got outreach. Do something like that. But they don't want to do that. Why? Because they want to keep things the way it is. They don't want to talk about the awful statistics. There's one interesting person that nobody knows anything about. Have you ever heard of a guy named Manning Johnson?
No, I haven't.
Manning Johnson. Manning Johnson was a black man born in 1908. The NAACP was born in 1909 by white liberals. Manning Johnson grew up as a believer in communism. He was born in this country. In the early 20s, he was recruited into the U.S. Communist Party. Not because they liked black people, they couldn't stand black people, but they needed them.
Yeah.
And eventually he went on to be one of the heads of something called the Negro Communist Commission in this country. And the Negro Communist Commission was controlled and took their orders directly from Moscow. And their whole charter and their whole mission was to subvert the black community and to begin painting the narrative that it's the white people that are keeping you out of work, down in the ghettos, and all this anti-white stuff. And after a period of time, Manny was like, "Man, this isn't what I signed up for. This is not good." Right? So he stepped out of the movement and wrote a book called Color Communism and Common Sense. And in that book, he highlights exactly what he was instructed to do by Russians. Now, the Russians knew that they weren't going to be able to turn our country into a communistic country.
Right.
The only way they would be able to do it is by initiating race wars.
Yeah.
And he paints this. He has a final statement. It was in 1958. It's on YouTube. It's not a video, but it's audio. And it's amazing. The guy's absolutely amazing because he breaks down the NAACP, how crooked they are. They're as crooked today as they were then.
Oh yeah.
And he is no fan. And he paints this, everything that we're living through today, goes back to Karl Marx and all these characters, right?
Yeah.
But nobody ever talks about Manning Johnson. And I think it's critically important. The left won't talk about him because he helps people to understand where this stuff actually began in this country and how. And then you look at people like Howard and Piven and Saul Alinsky, those radicals, right? But they adopted context from which was created by him and Russians, and then they expanded on that to do their. If you ever, I have a little summary on my website. If you just type in Manning, you'll find him. I think he's a fascinating guy that nobody knows anything about.
No, it is fascinating, and I am going to look that up. It's fascinating, like you said, that Marxism has kind of been pushed, I guess, onto our country, right? That it's kind of seeped in, around there through the cracks. What I find to be a fascinating dynamic of this whole discussion is that critical race theory actually takes from much of Marx's philosophy, right? In their writings, and their philosophy, and their ideology, and they don't hide this, right? I mean, it's not as though the critical race theorists are trying to hide that Marx's work is an inspiration to them, right? But what Marx said, essentially, just to give like a short primer on it, Marx's claim was that he viewed humanity in two groups, into an oppressed and oppressor, and that created a lot of problems, right? Because you can't split all of humanity into two groups, but that's what he did. He made this dialectic of oppressed and oppressor, and he sorted them by class. And so he created these two classes, the bourgeois and the proletariat. And the bourgeois were the evil, laughing with the top hat and the curly mustache. They were the evil people that were oppressing the proletariat. And he was very critical of capitalism, and obviously came up with communism as a solution for that, quote unquote solution. But what was interesting was that essentially his claim, his way of viewing the world as this, he viewed all of human history as a class struggle, rich versus poor, right? The elite versus the common man. That was kind of his philosophy. And his claim was that the rich create institutions, and they frame the public dialogue, and they frame the news media in order to benefit the wealthy at the expense of the poor, right? This was, and Marx's claim that the entire society was structured in this way. Now, what's interesting is that Marx's conception, communism, it didn't work. I mean, it was tried in many different places. It was tried in China, and it was tried in Russia. And by the end of the 20th century, it was clear that this experiment hadn't worked. But there were still a lot of scholars, especially in American academia, that were Marxists and that agreed with his work. And so what they did was they pivoted. They kept Marx's essential message, but instead of making it a class war, which is what Marx was teaching, was that it was a war between the rich and the poor, they made it into a race war. They made it white versus black, or they made it male versus female, man versus woman, or they made it, gay versus straight. They made it into a culture war instead of a class war. But what's so fascinating about this for me is that this culture war of turning men versus women, rich versus poor, black versus white, etc., is that the modern day Marxists, the people who still subscribe to Marx's original vision, they are highly critical of critical race theory, of this kind of this new age social justice woke ideology. And to me, I don't find it surprising at all that Loudoun County, Virginia, happens to be the richest county in the entire country, right? And also kind of the cultural battleground, right? The forefront of this culture war is happening in Loudoun County. because what the original Marxists are saying is that this whole, like you said, this pivoting from class to, to race, and to create this culture war is just another way by which the bourgeois oppress poor, right? They oppress the people, the proletariat. And so what I find so fascinating about this is that I completely agree with you that the people who seem to be pushing this the hardest are wealthy elites, right? Are people with, are white educated, progressives, or, people in the NAACP that obviously have, quite a bit of money and power. It's ironic because this seems to be, this whole culture war that we're engaged in really just seems to be another way by which those in power keep their power, right? They're dividing us on race, on lines of race and sexuality and sexual orientation. And in the meantime, they laugh all the way to the bank. I mean, I kind of want to get your perspective of that. Do you think it's a coincidence that Loudoun County, with the richest county in the entire nation, happens to be the forefront of the battleground over this ideology?
I didn't anticipate this is where we would end up, but it's really not surprising. I mean, when you look at a lot of things, I mean, we're 30 minutes outside of DC.
Mm-hmm.
We're, our state has gone blue. Our county has gone blue. And there's a lot of money from government contractors, bringing people in. There's a lot of government work, tons of government workers out here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. My daughter went on a week vacation with her friend a couple of weeks ago, and they went down to South Carolina. And you see these things behind me. They're called the American flag.
Oh, those racist things. Yes, I
exactly.
Yeah.
She said when they went down to South Carolina, and it was everywhere. She said it was so patriotic being down there that she just wanted us to just pick up and move down there. And then we come back here, and it is such a politically correct environment around here, because you got a lot of snobs, right? A lot of people with money, that you have to act a certain way. You can't come out, you can't do this, you can't talk like that. And we're a huge melting pot, right? I mean, it's just, you have every ethnic diversity here, right? Whether they're, it doesn't matter. I mean, we have every flavor here. And when you have this much money in a county, our school budget is I think it's going into 1.6 or 1.7 billion dollars just for our schools. And you get somebody like Michelle Thomas, who's a radical kook. She's a crook. President of the NAACP, sees opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Where? Because 65 cents of every dollar in taxes in this county goes to the public school systems. It's the richest entity in the county.
Mm-hmm.
And all four of her organizations are tapped into it. It's no coincidence.
Wow.
There's no coincidence. So you've got her Loudon Freedom Center, which, oh, by the way, is going to be given a $255,000 one-time grant that's coming from the state of Virginia, going through Loudoun County, her crooked friends up there, and passed through to her. For what? For some African-American history museum that doesn't exist. There's no budget. You know what the budget is? The budget table, when you go and you ask for $255,000, okay, how are you going to spend it? That's it. That's what the actual budget table looks like. No accountability. But that's $255,000 she's going to get for free, and then she's going to milk the school system, because there's one thing you may, when you brought up that the discrimination complaint she filed against Loudoun County to the AG. So the end result was, so the NAACP, Michelle Thomas, put into place and crafted something called Terms of Conciliation. Terms of Conciliation was baked or built into the final judgment. And don't you know, within that final judgment, Loudoun County will be able to seek the services of consultant for educational purposes, including Loudon Freedom Center. Oh, she just happens to own that. So what they've done is they're bringing Chicago-style politics into Loudoun County.
Yeah.
And, it's her. She's crooked as a day is long. And so is Buddha Bibaraj, who's the Commonwealth attorney. The supervisor, the board of supervisors, are all freaking crooked, right? But here's the upside. Is this started in like 2019. I'm sure there was shenanigans before that, but that's when really things started kind of moving. Is we're at the early stages. Chicago is a lost cause, right? The crooked politics have been in there forever. Here, we stand a chance at salvation by blowing them up, by exposing them left and right, because they're like the, trendsetters for this radical corruption movement that taps in and ties into critical race theory, supports it. And then there's a lot of other corrupt initiatives and things that are involved in around the county. But because we're early on in this discovery, people just got to be aware. They got to, they have to know, because if there's any salvation, it's now. Voting these people out when their term comes up, out, and staying on them like stink on a monkey, so people know. And if people don't vote correctly, and correctly isn't, I don't care which way you vote. I just don't want to see these people in power.
Yeah.
We need people of the people, by the people, and for the people, not against the people.
So in your mind, this whole equity initiative, the NAACP's meddling with, the Loudoun County school system, the pushing CRT into the curriculum, from your perspective, this is all just a con game. That this is all very calculated for a political purpose. That's how you see this.
Political and financial.
Yeah. The people are getting rich off of this. That's
people are getting rich, whether it's the NAACP, her own business, friends of hers that have their own consulting engagements or consulting companies that do consulting. Everybody's making a buck, right? And it's being driven by just a few people.
At the expense of Loudoun County. I mean, at the expense, really, of your kids.
Our school board is twisted, warped, fraudulent, feckless turds. But they're not the only ones that people need to be looking at.
Yeah.
They really are not. Yeah, they got to go, right? And I think there's a recall effort underway for them, and that's going to take some time, but fine. But we got to go after all the other things. There's not the only silver bullet to any sort of resolution or modicum of hope is the parents and the citizens. It's not a recall. It's not my posts. It's not articles. It's the participation of the citizens and the parents. That's the biggest silver bullet you can hope for that will take all this stuff down.
Well, I'm glad you're speaking out about it. I hope we can get the word out there. I really hope that we can make a difference, and I hope we can bring the attention of the American people, to what's happening, so that this doesn't happen in their communities. I mean, this stuff is happening in school boards and counties all over the country. This battlefield extends beyond Loudoun County. I mean, this has become a war, and I really am not exaggerating. This is a war.
No, I agree. And hopefully we can help others. I shot you a second website that we have that I created about a month and a half ago. And the whole intent was that because I constantly get emails from people around the country. What can we do? How can we do it? Do you have a chapter? Do you have an affiliate? And so I created this website as a means to try to help people, provide them real life examples of what equity training, materials, documentation, proposals, master services agreements, all this stuff, what it looks like, how to get involved, what they can do, information on how to create FOIAs, because that's a very important element of, trying to, out your elected representatives and whoever else. I hate sending people there only because I feel like I'm passing the buck sometimes, But at this point in time, that's about the best I can do.
Okay.
And I'm constantly adding to it, and I hope that people, find it useful. But they have to get to the point where they just don't care. Meaning, I don't care what you call me. This is not right, and we have to do something about it.
Yeah, and that is one of the, again, that's one of the difficulties with addressing this. That the progressives, the people on the left that are pushing this into our schools and into our communities, they intentionally use loaded language. They intentionally use slurs and personal attacks to try to silence anybody who disagrees with them. And the reason is because they don't have reasoned argument to defend their position. Their position is indefensible. I mean, this ideology is profoundly anti-American. It's profoundly anti-intellectual. It's anti-science. It's anti-liberal. And if we push back, the only thing they have is to try to attack us, ruin our reputations, target our families. Like you said, your family's been targeted. And you just, like you said, you just have to become thick-skinned, because it's the only way to make a real difference is to just ignore it and say, well, I was kind of raised with this idea that as soon as personal attacks become involved, you've won the argument, right? That's kind of that was the philosophy I was raised with, is that as soon as someone has to start attacking you, you've already won. And so in a sense, I'd say we've already won the argument. If they're attacking us, if they're calling for our deaths and all this craziness, we won, but now we just have to convince the American people that, this stuff, it has no place in the American school system. It has no place in American politics, really. It's got to go. It's just got to go. And,
no two ways about it.
And so, man, I'm really glad I invited you on. It's been wonderful getting to meet you, to hear about, what you've gone through, this movement that you started to try to address this and try to make people aware of what's happening. And we're going to keep fighting, right? We're going to keep fighting.
We have to.
Well, we have to. Yeah, there's no other choice. I was talking to a teacher. Her name is Jennifer McWilliams, right? Who similar thing happened to her in Indiana, I think it was. She just like Tanner Cross expressed her concern.
She lost that case, right?
Yeah, and I'm interviewing her, I think soon. I want to hear her story. I want to hear what happened to her. But essentially, her point was that there's nowhere left to flee. There's nowhere left to go in this country, to escape this stuff. And my point was, well, if we can't flee, then we have to fight, right? That's the only option left. So you can't run away from this stuff. Don't think you can just dig your head in the sand and just expect it to disappear. This is going to affect you, and it's going to affect your kids.
100%.
So
this is not like a battle over an increase of 2% in taxes.
No,
this is it. Do or die, really, is where we're at.
It's a battle for the soul of the country.
Yeah, very much so.
And so, yeah, Scott, I'm glad to have you on. We're going to keep talking. I want to keep talking to you. I want to hear more about what's happening. But thank you so much for taking your time. I know you're very busy, but taking your time to come on and express, what you've been going through and how you're fighting. So
I appreciate the opportunity. I really do, and I appreciate what you're doing. It's Lord knows we need the help, and you're giving it the time, and I can't thank you enough for doing that.
Well, I can't thank you enough, man. And James Lindsay's coming. What is it, next month to Loudon?
August 21st. Yeah, he'll be here. We're going to have a PACT to School event.
Nice.
And so what we're working on is we got Mr. Lindsay coming in. We've got Luke Rosiak, who's the senior investigator at the Daily Wire for educational. He broke the story actually on the kooky NAACP lady that wants people to die that don't believe what she does. and we're going to arm our teachers, parents, and students with information materials, like not academic, but like real stuff that I'm capturing from the school system, so they can go in and interrogate their teachers. I'm going to take out another full page ad next week highlighting HB 257, and I'm going to include a QR code so parents can zap that and go and look at every single principal in this county, track theirs down, and start hounding them about this. Don't hide anything. Bug them. I don't care what you have to do. I mean, this is the safety of our kids and teachers. So whatever we can do to sound the alarms and embolden and engage people and help them easily, we're gonna do.
All right, man. That's awesome. I'm so glad you guys have a plan. I'm glad that James Lindsay's coming. He's a huge leader in this fight. And so we'll have you on again soon. I'd love to talk to you again, and we're going to keep in contact. And you have a wonderful day. You have a wonderful weekend.
All right, Adam. You too, man. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.